Unfortunately, not all of the topics I have to cover today are positive ones. We're not just going to be bloomering all day, unfortunately, as there was a bit of an atrocity that's been occurring over the last few days. Sort of an atrocity among atrocities, I should say, that Israel's been committing on the Palestinian people, only this time it was on a refugee camp in Rafah. I believe it was the Rafah border crossing, correct me if I'm wrong, like that area recently got like fully pushed in on by the IDF about 2 weeks ago when they like rolled in with tanks and ground troops, and they were like rolling over the I Heart Gaza sign with the tank and stuff. Really disgusting stuff to see on video. Well, it's escalated substantially, and over the last 3 days, I think it's over 100 people have died. I know I've seen a headline where it's 53 Palestinian civilians. I know that I saw a headline where it was 12 children. I've seen another headline where it was closer to 60. So, and I know it's been days since I read those ones. So at this point, it's probably racked up a fair amount because I'm constantly seeing new updates on my news headline, like my news timelines, that like more airstrikes, more bombings are taking place like throughout the day. It's not like it happened a few days ago and stopped. There's been continuous massacring since then. I guess I kind of refer to it as a massacre because like no Zionist like definition poacher can really get mad at you for describing it as a massacre, because it objectively, by every definition, is when an armed force attacks and a civilian unarmed force is slaughtered in that attack. That is a massacre. In fact, I'm pretty sure this event will be written down on Wikipedia and referred to as the Rafah massacre. It might literally end up getting that name historically. This is by definition a massacre. No Zionist can like pick apart that definition, or whatever. John Fetterman throwing a party right now. I mean, John Fetterman might be puking himself for all we know. Like, the dude is not gonna get reelected, and I think he knows it.
Israeli tanks are pushing into central Rafah for the first time since it expanded its offensive there. This as U.S. officials say the military-built pier that's used for delivering aid into Gaza is out of commission.
I saw someone carrying their dead kid. It was terrible. Yeah, I did too. I assume you're talking about the video where it's the father holding up the decapitated toddler, and the body's like obviously very... I hate to go into detail about this, but I need to give you guys a perspective on how fucked up this is and what kind of videos coming out about this. This morning, I was on Twitter, and one of the videos that came out of Rafah is literally a father holding up a decapitated body of a toddler. It's blackened, like it's been burnt, and covered in dust and rubble for maybe days. And it's just, you know, it's pretty gruesome. It's a fucked up thing. And it's not like, you can look at that video or not, or hear me describe it, which is, I think, what I'd advise to all of you. And you can, like, that can upset you, but you got to remember, this is just one kid out of, at this point, tens of thousands that have been killed in the same way. So when you see those videos, understand you're just seeing a tiny little sliver poking up from the surface of the iceberg that is underneath that surface.
And the international outcry is intensifying over a deadly airstrike in Gaza's southernmost city on Sunday. At least 45 people were killed in the attack. Israel's military says it targeted 2 Hamas commanders using, quote, small munitions. Officials believe shrapnel...
Like, look at this shit. Like, this is literally... It looks like if you got rid of the news headline stuff and showed someone this image, you would think it was like a scene being practically filmed for a movie. Because this kind of stuff, like, you don't expect it to happen in real life. For, like, a developed nation that has a big name on the world stage, just firebomb. Well, maybe not firebomb, but to bomb to the point of setting on fire a refugee camp, killing at least dozens of people, including children. The refugee camp area did in fact have Hamas using Palestinians as human shields, and Israel attacked them to kill few Hamas members, and the refugees were casualties caught in the attack. That's why the definition snipers will say it's not technically a genocide, and that's why I'll say just call it massacres or whatever, so that they don't let that argument get muddy. Don't get in the weeds with them. Just talk about what's actually happening. Sure. Yeah, Israel is fighting Hamas. When they bomb these places, they are trying to bomb Hamas. That does not change the fact that when Hamas uses human shields, Israel's response is just to go, okay then, and to shoot the human shield. That's not what you're supposed to do. If American cops did that, we wouldn't have cops anymore. That institution would be gone in a week if that was the way American cops handled human shield situations. But for some reason, the IDF is allowed to do it, and it's completely just make excuses for it. There's no excuse for it. Like, Israel could fight Hamas in a way that does not cause countless civilian deaths.
Quote, small munitions. Officials believe shrapnel from the strike hit a fuel tank, causing a secondary explosion.
So I guess that's how the fires started, is there were small munitions they dropped, like the shrapnel shit they dropped onto this refugee camp, and then a bit of shrapnel hit a fuel tank and set it off, and it caused a massive fire. I mean, this is just what you would expect doing this. Like the IDF should expect this kind of outcome at this point. It's not like it's their first day.
Which set the displaced persons camp in flames. Let's bring in CBS News contributor Robert Berger, who joins us now from Jerusalem. I want to get to Rafah in a second, but first I just want to ask you about that breaking.
Small munitions is a specific phrase. I believe what they were using was effectively like they were basically dropping grenades on them. They were basically dropping frag grenades onto this refugee camp, is my understanding, and that's what I understand small munitions to be, like frag grenade sized, like bombs that you drop or place and or throw, lob in some cases. Like grenade launchers, I think, count as small munitions. Grenades are small munitions. Yeah. Grenades that have a tendency not to go off until a child picks up. Grenades that have a tendency not to go off until a child picks it up. Yeah, that I've heard about that shit. It's just so fucking horrible.
Breaking news off, out of the pier, out of commission for at least a week, getting this desperately needed aid into Gaza. How much more of a challenge will it be now?
Just hasn't gone according to plan. Originally,
it was grenade launchers specifically. Okay, I guess it was handheld mortar grenade launchers. Wow, I didn't even know what they were using. I was just listing things I know to be small munitions, but there you go. Grenade launchers was the thing they used.
They were hoping that 90 trucks a day would come off that U.S. pier and go up to 150 a day, but there's been all kinds of logistical problems as well as problems with high seas. And so basically we have a situation where simply not enough aid is getting into Gaza. Israel also took over the Rafah border crossing about 10 days ago, which was the main crossing from Egypt into Gaza. And since then, the Egyptians haven't allowed aid to cross in from there. So the humanitarian situation really just getting worse in Gaza.
And Israel is continuing its operations in Rafah despite international criticism. What's the latest there?
We're hearing a report.
Do the ICC have a warrant out for Netanyahu yet? Or did that not get approved? Are they still working on approval for that warrant? Because if they can get that approved, then Netanyahu literally is a prisoner in his own country. If he ever tries to fly out, there is no friendly airspace through which he can't get ambushed by ICC jets. I guess it would be like NATO jets. Still in the works. Still working on it. I'm glad it's not dead in the water, I was worried that it's been a bit and I haven't heard about it. I was worried that was dead in the water and they only got it approved for the Hamas leaders.
Reports of heavy fighting between Israeli forces and Hamas militants. And, the situation in Rafah is such that civilians are typically caught in the middle. According to Palestinian officials.
No, civilians are not typically caught in the middle. Hamas uses them as human shields, and the IDF, knowing this, attacks anyway. This is intent on both sides of the war to hurt civilians. And Israel are in the position to just take a step back and not kill those civilians. Israel are the ones in the position of much higher power in which they have the resources, time, everything they need to do this right. And we shouldn't expect moral goodness from Hamas. Hamas is bad. Everything they fight for is bad. Hamas does need to be stopped. We shouldn't expect them to be the good guys. We shouldn't expect them to not use human shields. They're bad. They're evil. Hamas is an evil organization. They're hyper reactionary, extremely anti-Semitic. Obviously, they're bad, and they're going to use human shields. Israel likes to position itself as a good nation, though. A morally upstanding country fighting a bad enemy. They have the responsibility to not shoot the human shields in this case. The onus at this point, I put on Israel. There is blame to be assigned to Hamas, don't get me wrong, but the onus is on Israel to preserve the lives of these civilians. They have the ability to do this.
In one Israeli strike on a tent camp in a so-called safe area, at least 20 people have been killed. So even though you have more than 1 million Palestinians who have been evacuated from that area, you still have the problem of civilian casualties and, you know, what they call collateral damage.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the airstrike.
Literally in like TV shows and shit, the villains call it collateral damage when like a family gets crushed by like the super evil Inator 5000. Like, that's literally a thing in movies. Like, when the Marvel villain gets some, like, innocent people killed, they're like, just call it collateral damage. You know? Like, what the fuck?
A tragic mishap. But when you see the images that are coming out that are just so horrific to watch and see, I mean, how are the images and how are his remarks being received on an international scale?
Well, there has been outrage by this strike that you mentioned that took place late Sunday. This massive fire that spread through the tent camp, and there's been outrage from European countries, the UN calling on Israel to stop this war. But now Israel is saying that basically the munitions it used, 37.
Yeah, in Call of Duty, I don't think you're even allowed to shoot civilians in like any game except for maybe the campaign of that one with the no Russian bit, but like that's a different, you're not like, I don't think you're a soldier in that, or if you are, you're like undercover or something, and you have to like keep up a character. I forget what the story of that COD was. But yeah, like the, yeah, like Israel is worse than Modern Warfare 2, a game notorious for war crimes excluding no Russian. Yeah, like no Russian is like the exception though, right? Obviously Modern Warfare 2 did have some pretty surprisingly salient critique of the military-industrial complex, which is not common in Call of Duty campaigns at all.
7-pound bombs, 2 of them, to target 2 senior Hamas commanders could not have caused that massive blaze. They're saying that apparently Hamas munitions in the area exploded, possibly by shrapnel. But, you know, from a public relations standpoint, you know, Israel seems to be trying to...
You know the statistics about how, like, 40% of the population of Gaza is under, like, what, 16 years old or 18 years old or something? You can see that when you see these crowds. Like, a lot of these people are kids.
Shift the blame to Hamas, but from a public relations standpoint, I think the damage to Israel's image has already been done.
So that said, what's happening internally within Israeli politics?
Well, you have the 3-man war cabinet with one member, Benny Gantz, threatening to quit the government on June 8th. He's unhappy with the way Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is prosecuting the war.
This is something that I feel not enough progressives are talking about. Israel is not, even within its current government, united in its like support of the way the IDF is like massacring civilians in Gaza. There are politicians that are like willing to step down in protest of what is happening. Like Netanyahu is kind of the mastermind of a lot of this. He's not exclusive, but he's kind of the head of the snake at this point. And there's dissent within Israel's government. Yeah, anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism are not the same. In fact, I would argue that Zionists have been some of the most anti-Semitic actors in the political sphere in the last year.
2 reasons. One, he feels that
besides maybe Hamas and like the Houthis and stuff,
Netanyahu has blocked attempts to try and get a hostage deal. And two, he says that there's just simply no plan for the day after. Who will rule Gaza when the war is over? Gantz would like to accept the U.S. plan, which would see a path to a Palestinian state and possibly peace with Saudi Arabia. But Netanyahu is rejecting that. He and the hardliners in his government oppose a Palestinian state.
This is the IDF.
Robert Berger, appreciate you joining us on this breaking news and a more far-reaching conversation. We want to turn now to our chief White House correspondent, Nancy Cordes, who's at the White House for more on the Biden administration's response. So, Nancy, we've been talking about the international criticism here on the attack in Rafah. How's the White House responding?
I'd say the White House response has been fairly muted compared to what we've seen from other quarters. The National Security Council, Lindsay, put out a statement last night.
Biden's in an effectively impossible situation. I don't know what else Biden can do other than to drop Israel. And you know how earlier I said it's stupid to fear World War III? That's the exception. I don't know if you guys know this. I've talked about it multiple times before, but Israel is so fucking insane when it comes to self-preservation. They have a public, globally known policy of what happens if they lose. It's called the Samsonian option. And just like the biblical character, the Jewish hero Samson, though I would actually argue Samson was more like the world's first terrorist, to be honest. Like, he would collapse everything down on everyone, killing himself and everybody else that was the enemy, right? So the idea is that if Israel falls, then they will launch their entire nuclear arsenal, cause a nuclear Armageddon, and destroy the planet. The Samsonian option. So I don't know what would happen if Biden just said, sorry, no more support from the U.S. anymore, and just ditched Israel. I don't even know how that would work, or if it's possible, or if, like, the Republicans... Like, is that even the president's decision? Could the Republicans block that? Is that a Supreme Court decision? I imagine that would be up to the Senate or the House, not the Supreme Court. I suppose an executive order could potentially do it, but then the executive order could get vetoed by the Senate. So I guess the Senate could have... Or not the Senate, the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court could have a say. And it's a Trump Supreme Court, so they very well would probably veto any executive order Biden passed to try to disconnect U.S. support from Israel. It's like, I don't think it's a congressional decision. How's Congress right now? Isn't Congress, like, I think we have the House right now and Republicans have Congress, or is it the other way around? Yeah. Dems have the Senate. It seems like Republicans have the House right now. So that would be bad. I don't think Biden even could, like, I don't think the Democrats would be able to disconnect from this, because that would be a like, I don't think that would be a Senate decision or a president decision. Is Zan buffering? Yeah, that was me buffering. Yeah. No, I don't know. Like, I want to say I don't think Biden realistically could just drop Israel. Like, I don't think Biden internally is super pro-Israel. I think that, like, supporting Israel is, for a variety of reasons, like, a thing that American politicians are expected to do no matter what. Like, even if they are critical of Israel, they have to be supportive. But at the same time, it makes sense, like, if he can't do anything more, because Biden has been the forefront to pushing for ceasefires between Israel and Hamas. So it just seems like he doesn't want this fighting to continue. He wants the ceasefire to happen, but he doesn't want to drop Israel, or he can't do it. It's hard to say. It's a difficult choice. Yeah, I mean, Israel is also a powerful ally. Do we want to drop them? That's a hard choice, and it could potentially, like, to be fair, there are a surprising amount of Democrats that do support Israel as well. Like, there is a certain tightrope he has to walk, because a fair amount of American Jews do believe Zionism and, like, Judaism are one and the same, and that if you're anti-Zionist, you're anti-Semitic, and thus, like, Israel existing is the way that, like, Jewish people's safety can be assured. And if you're thinking this is crazy, you got to understand that at the same time, historically, Jewish people are the most hate-crimed, enslaved, and genocided group to ever exist in history. Like, total up all the numbers, the Jews have had it worse time and time and time again. Even if you account for slavery, if we look at the total scale of human history, it's just Jewish people have been for some reason just continuously targeted. And so there is a really broad idea among many Jewish people, particularly in America, that there's never again. There could be another Holocaust, right? And we'll never let that happen again. And a lot of that is the never again thing is sort of what Israel uses as their justification for existing, going back decades and decades and decades and decades. The idea that Israel existing is a way of securing the safety of Jewish people, because let's say a genocide of Jews happens again somewhere in Eastern Europe or something. There's a place that accepts Jews and will provide them a home and citizenship, et cetera, be welcome home, escape. That was the idea. That is the marketing of Israel.
Calling the images that we're seeing coming out of this camp in Rafah devastating and heartbreaking, reiterating once again that Israel needs to do more to protect civilians. But the statement doesn't go on to say what, if anything, the U.S. is going to do if it determines that the Israelis aren't doing enough to protect Palestinian civilians. I mean, we saw the president halt one shipment of...
If you criticize Israel, you're not getting the support of the American citizens, no matter how right you are. I do think that you're probably a bit right. A lot of people don't know how much, how low on the scale of, concern Gaza and Israel are to the average American. There's been polling on this, and Israel-Gaza is one of the lowest concern issues in the election for people that have taken the polling. Like I've said, the real problem that a lot of people have with Biden is he's old. That they don't, the American people are not as critical or opposed to Israel as you may think, or as I would like them to be. In 10 years, this may change. It very well may. But I've noticed there's a trend, and I'm not trying to rip on the left or anything here. I'm making a little bit of an observation. I've noticed a trend where it feels like a lot of leftists online sort of subtly, and I've noticed myself do this, and I had to pull myself out of it, slowly and subtly trick yourself into believing that your ideas are more popular than they are. It happened during Bernie's run in the primaries, where if you asked me or any other lefty online, Bernie had it in the bag, and the American people wanted Bernie. But it just wasn't true. There was a very loud outcry, a loud minority of people in the Democratic Party that wanted Bernie, a very passionate grassroots funding support group, but they just weren't the majority. They weren't enough to beat out Elizabeth Warren, Biden, or who else was it up there? I think Warren, Biden, Klobuchar, Bloomberg. I can't remember anyone else that was running in that primary. But I think he got left in the dust by even Warren. Yeah. It's just it's easy to get convinced that our beliefs are more popular than they are, even among the side politically that tends to vote the same way we do. Our ideas are still very much radical, even to most left-leaning Americans. If you're in this chat, you probably have radical politics in the view of most Democrat voters. And that realization may sound crazy to you, but I promise it's true. You can look up the polling by political party affiliation, issue by issue, if you want to see.
1,000 and 2,000 pound bombs to Israel, but then other munitions were allowed to be sent to Israel. And so beyond that, it's unclear whether the U.S. plans to take any action if it determines that.
I love the image where it's Patrick Starr playing basketball, and it just says another $2 trillion to Israel.
This strike and in other strikes that the Israelis did not do enough to ensure that there would be as few civilian casualties in Gaza as possible.
God.
Are you learning of any discussions of next steps if these events continue?
Not right now. If those discussions are taking place, they aren't sharing them with us. In fact, if anything, they've always been very circumspect when we've asked them repeatedly, Lindsay, and I'm not just talking about here at the White House, but also at the State Department.
No, like, Biden literally shouldn't say anything. Like I know that you guys might get mad at me for this, but if we don't want, like, Trump to win, strategically, Biden shouldn't say anything. Anything he says won't be enough for people that are like us, that are critical of Israel, because it's not like outright stopping Israel, which he can't do. And he can't criticize Israel because A, it wouldn't be enough to satisfy us, frankly, because that doesn't change like whether or not kids are dying. And B, like, it just pisses off the like substantial amount of Democrat voters that believe anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, and will fall for the Republican narrative that they are already trying to push, that Biden is anti-Semitic, because he has lightly criticized Israel, to be fair. Lightly.
The Pentagon, across this government, when we have asked, what is the president's red line?
Although, more specifically, he's criticized Netanyahu, which I guess calling like leaders out by name is cool, but like, yeah. No, sure. I'll take it as a W, I guess. A small Biden W on the issue.
What is it that he is prepared to do if these civilian casualties continue? And U.S. officials have always been reluctant to say. And so it's really unclear at this point if there is anything they feel that they could do publicly to...
Dude, look how many of them are kids, dude. Like, seriously. Like, the stats aren't lying about how much of Gaza's population are actual children. Like, this is an insane amount of children. You go to fucking Disney World, and there's not this many kids in the crowd. And I'm not joking. I've been to Disney World in Florida. There's not this many kids in the fucking crowd. There's more adults at Disney World than there are in this crowd. I'm not fucking joking. It's genuinely just... like, I can't tell if I'm still nauseous from the last couple days or if this is making me nauseous. That's because the kids often go with family. Yeah, well, a lot of these kids are orphaned. You know that, right? Like, a lot of these kids were, like they're small, so they're a little more likely to survive. Like, when wherever they are gets attacked and their parents end up dying, a lot of these kids are orphaned. And there are a lot of kids that are orphaned and barely survived and are not well enough to be walking around. Like, these are the kids that survived well enough that they can walk around in the crowd. Many more are probably laid up somewhere, hopefully receiving medical attention. The majority of Gazans are orphans, yeah.
To change the trajectory, or if they're simply content to try to speak with Israeli officials behind the scenes and try to get them to change course.
Okay, I want to switch gears. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is heading to Eastern Europe to discuss the war in Ukraine. What more do we know about this trip?
Really interesting trip. He's heading to Prague, where he'll be meeting with other NATO foreign ministers to discuss some recent setbacks in Ukraine, how they can best support Ukraine. But then he's also going to be traveling to Moldova, which borders on Ukraine. It is much smaller, like Ukraine. It's a former Soviet satellite. And the U.S. is very concerned about Russian influence efforts there. And in Georgia,
I mean, that's a very good concern, and I like that they're doing that, but at the same time, it feels so hollow, and, like, there's such a horrible atrocity being committed by one of the U.S.'s closest allies and being, like, enabled by the U.S., and then, like, immediately, we need to talk about how we're going to stop this horrible atrocity. We have a moral obligation to stop in Ukraine. It's like, I mean, I agree, but at the same time, it's like, can we have some consistency? Please. Please.
Another Soviet satellite not too far away. They are concerned that as Moldova tries to join the European Union, tries to take steps towards democracy.
The average voter wants free healthcare, lower taxes, and money to Israel. So fucking true.
To do that, and the Georgians as well, that the Russians are working to make that as difficult as possible with disinformation, trying to influence various levers of government there. And so the Secretary of State is traveling to Moldova to basically send a very public signal to Russia.
Listen, guys, I'm telling you, if gas prices get even $1 higher, like, Hitler gets elected in America in this coming election. We like, Americans will resurrect Hitler with psychic energy to make him president. You gotta know. The average American voter is not as progressive and concerned about this genocide as we are, okay? They are not as concerned. I think it's effectively a genocide. I'm not like the vocabulary cuck, but I know that if I get clipped calling it a genocide and people are like, Xander, can you defend calling it a genocide? Well, how do you feel about the fact that Israel provides electricity, water, and aid to Gaza? How do you feel about the fact that Israel actually has discriminated against civilian and Palestinian populations? If they really wanted to do a genocide, wouldn't they just bomb them all? Like, it would be that conversation for 2 fucking hours, and I refuse. So I'm just going to call it massacres. I get that you guys want me to call it a genocide. I promise you I'm not calling it a genocide because I disagree. I just don't want to end up in that debate. I want to debate about like what Israel is doing word for word, like the bombing of the refugee camp at the Rafah crossing that led to literally dozens of children dying, including a video I would be able to provide as evidence, though I wouldn't want to have to, of a child whose head was blown off. I don't blame you, Zan. Yeah, I don't want to have one of the people who justifies this shit to like try and get me with gotcha shit, you know? You gotta understand, I have to be ready for the gotchas, okay? You guys don't have to be fair, unless you're gonna be debating. I have to be, and that's why I don't call it a genocide. It's a genocide. You don't have to be ready for the gotchas, so you can call it a genocide. But I'm not getting myself baited into that debate. Makes sense? Don't let them BS you? Yeah. Like, if they want to take issue with what I'm saying, they have to take issue with me describing the actual word-for-word thing that Israel did. And if they want to argue about that, then I'll happily have that debate. Like them trying to deny some atrocity Israel committed specifically, and then like me bringing up the evidence and all the reports on it, the video and everything. Yeah, that's the debate I want to have with Zionists. I want to see them try to defend and squirm as they try to defend the like specific massacres. You're the guy who makes the statement, we are the ones who agree. True. That's your job. You have to agree with everything I say. The sky is orange. Well, actually, it is kind of orange right now. It's sunset. Anyway, The Lone Grifter, thank you for the tier 1 sub. I really appreciate that. Thank you for the $5 reduce. Very kind of you. Says, Trump was just found guilty in the hush money trial to know if it'll mean anything, but I guess we'll see. Yeah, I covered it earlier. Thank you for the tier 1 sub. I appreciate that. Your support is very kind. Yeah, very based. Yeah, I already covered that earlier, obviously. I don't know how much of an effect it's going to have, but yeah. Keep an eye out for that video when it goes up on YouTube, too, if you haven't already seen it. But if you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like, subscribe, ring the bell icon if you haven't already so YouTube tells you when I go live or upload. Follow my social medias, link down below. Comment down below to boost my channel in the algorithm. And, of course, if you want to support me financially directly, help me pay my bills, keep the lights on, pay for food, that kind of thing, consider donating, subscribing, or gifting a sub on my website, xanderhall.com/live, or supporting me through YouTube, Twitch, Streamlabs, Stream Elements, Patreon, or consider donating to me or buying merch through the Streamlabs link down below. And of course, if you want to support me, like through Discord or like be part of the community, the hub of my fan base, there's a link down below to join. Totally free. We host watch parties, call-in streams, and game events there, and I announce all my streams and uploads there as well. So if you have notifications on, even if YouTube neglects to tell you that I've gone live or uploaded, at least Discord will. So I hope to see you there. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.